this meeting. Otherwise, we're going to get started with this BPIM tonight for state project number 301-557, which is the interim repairs to the bridge number 0808R, Metro North over the Housatonic River. This is a live event, so join us for a question and answer session following the formal presentation and send us a question or comment during the session. You can also reach us by our project email, which is dotproject301-557@ct.gov, at our phone number where you can leave a voicemail at 860-594-2020, or you could get more information at our project webpage at https://portal.ct.gov /DOT/DEVON/BRIDGE301-557. A recording of this presentation will be posted after the live event. I'm going to go over some quick meeting overview. We're going to go do a little housekeeping for this presentation. Then we'll have the formal presentation of design. We'll explain the existing conditions and define the purpose and need. And then we'll propose recommendations. And then finally, we'll have that live question and answer session. And just to let folks know, all these links, phone numbers are being provided in the webinar chat. And just to go over our project team tonight, we have Bart Sweeney, Division Chief of Bridges for Connecticut DOT, Al Garcia, Principal Engineer for Rail Bridges and Structures, Greg Funk, who is our project manager for this project, Dave Gritoria, who is our project engineer, and myself, Aaron Foster, at H&TB, assisting on this presentation. For the design team at AECOM, we have Andre St. Germain, who's the project manager, David D'Amato, who's the design lead, Ryan Apinovich, who's the environmental lead, and Genevieve Nuttall, who's the environmental planner. Title 6, Your Civil Rights. No person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. There is a voluntary post-meeting survey located at the DOT portal. And then civil rights information is available at the screen here, and they're both being posted in the chat. A live recording of this presentation will be posted to YouTube after the event, where closed captioning will be including non-English translation options available. This is the Title 6 notice to the public. This is the Title 6 notice to the public in Spanish. For the question and answer session, folks can reach us by email. We'll be checking that throughout the night at DOT project 301-557@ct.gov. Again, by phone, you can leave a voicemail 860-594-2020, or by the Zoom Q&A chat. We'll be moderating all three during the live Q&A session later tonight. And then comment period is open through January 23rd, 2025. And just to note, the Zoom Q&A is only available during this live Q&A session. Now I'm going to hand over to Greg to go over the project.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation with us. My name is Gregory Funk, and I am the CTDOT project manager for this project. So this virtual public information meeting is for the Devon Movable Railroad Bridge, which carries Metro North Main Line over the Housatonic River between Milford and Stratford. The structure is number 08080R, and it is at railroad milepost at 60.42. So the purpose and need of this project is to rehabilitate the Devon Movable Railroad Bridge to keep the structure serviceable until the replacement structure can take for rail service. And just to note that this meeting is for the interim repair project only. The full replacement project is in the preliminary stages and not part of this meeting. On this screen is the design schedule for this project. Design completion is anticipated in March and construction is scheduled to begin in October of this year. And with that, I will turn this over to our design consultant, AECom. The project manager over there is Andre.
All right, thanks a lot, Greg. Welcome, everybody. Andre St. Germain, I'm the project manager for AECom. We are the designer of record for this project. I'm also joined tonight by Ryan Apanovich, who is our environmental lead, Dave D'Amato, who's our design lead, and Genevieve Nuttall, who's our environmental planner. I'll start by giving a quick overview of the existing bridge. The elevation view you see at the top of the screen, this is looking north. So Stratford will be on your left, Milford is on your right. It's a 7-span structure, carries 4 tracks of Metro North Railroad over the Housatonic River. There are actually 2 bridges that are side by side next to each other. Each bridge carries 2 tracks. Overall, it's about 1,000 feet long. It was built in 1905, so it's about 120 years old. It has had a few different rehabilitations over the years, notably 1990 and 2013. The condition of the superstructure is rated poor in the latest inspection report, but the bridge is safe to use. Don't be scared by the term poor. The bridge is safe, but the purpose of this project is to extend the service life of the bridge until it can be replaced. The abutments and piers are both rated satisfactory, so those are not being addressed under this project. I will start off with defining some key bridge terms that I'll be using throughout this presentation. The figure you see here is kind of a generic steel truss. You'll see they're color coded. So the green member at the top, that's what we refer to as a top chord of a truss. The pink members are diagonal members. The blue members are vertical members. The orange members are gusset plates, so those are the connections between all the various members. And then the bottom member is a bottom chord that you see in the cyan color. Some other generic terms that I'll be using. Live load, this refers to the weight of the train that goes over the bridge. Dead load refers to the self-weight of the bridge itself. Finite element model, this is a computer model that is developed to closely imitate or replicate the actual real-life bridge. Strain gauges, these are instruments or monitors that are attached to the bridge to gather information about the strain or stress or force that is going through each member. In high rail, this can be a construction vehicle or a maintenance vehicle that's intended for use on the railroad. And I'll take you all through kind of the workflow of our design process. The first thing we did was install a structural monitoring system. So this is installing those strain gauges I mentioned. The photo here you see on the right, this is a photo of us installing gauges up on the top chord of the truss using a boat with a bucket lift. Next slide, please. And here's another photo of the strain gauges. So you see at the bottom of the photo are the 3 yellow pieces of equipment. Those are the strain gauges. Those are attached via wire to data acquisition units, which are in the upper left corner. Those data acquisition units communicate wirelessly to a computer that's actually on the bridge site. And then that's connected to the internet. So all the data that we collect gets uploaded to the cloud and we can access it live. So after the strain gauges are installed on the bridge, we did a live load test. So basically we took a train with a known load. This is a GP35 locomotive. We know all the axle weights, we know the axle spacing, and we moved it across the bridge back and forth. And then using that information, we collected all the information from our strain gauges and we developed this 3D finite element model or computer model that closely replicates the existing bridge. And then using the data that we collected from the live load test, we can tweak the model so that it more accurately represents the behavior of the actual bridge. So we call that model calibration. And then once the model is calibrated, we can move on with our analysis and figure out exactly which members should be retrofitted to achieve that service life extension that we're talking about. I will give an overview of the proposed repairs. So the bridge will essentially remain the same in terms of the footprint. So the number of spans will stay the same, the length of the members will stay the same, but we're going to be adding on or retrofitting the existing members. So from afar, the bridge is not going to look any different. Some of the retrofits that we're talking about are adding additional steel plates to truss members, or the gusset plates, which are the connections between the truss members, or the connections maybe in the floor system where you have stringers and floor beams. There will be no modifications to the existing abutments and piers, as those are in satisfactory condition. There will be no permanent changes to the surrounding environment. There will be some temporary impacts, and Ryan will talk about that in a little bit, but those are fairly minimal. And there will also be some temporary change in the low chord of the bridge, and I'll talk about that in a few slides, where we have an underslung platform as one means of access. So temporarily, the vertical clearance will get less beneath some of the spans. To perform the work, there are 3 different types of construction access we're looking at. I'll go from left to right here. First, you have the flexi float system. So this is a modular floating barge system. It's kind of pieced together, and you could build it to like any shape or size that you want, but it's very durable and suitable for heavier construction equipment. So that is one type that we'll be using. Next in the middle, you have a quick deck. So this is an underslung platform that is suspended from the bridge above. Again, this is sturdy enough to hold equipment, materials, and workers as well. And then on the right is a high rail vehicle. This has a bucket along with it. So it's a construction vehicle that uses the rails on the railroad. And we'll be using all 3 of these. Those high rail vehicles can gain access to the track either from Naugatuck Ave in Milford or Longbrook Avenue in Stratford, depending on which track it's getting onto. And here's a graphic that comes out of our preliminary design submission showing the 3 different access types. I've highlighted them. So the highlights in green, those are the barges or flexi floats that we'll be using. At any given time, we'll only be using 2. This plan shows a lot more than 2 because this shows it for every single span, but we're only going to be using 2, and they're going to move sequentially. We're going to perform the work 1 span at a time, and the barges will move as the work is completed. The barges were used everywhere where it was deep enough to use barges. So you'll see we're supplementing that with an underslung platform, which is highlighted in red. For instance, in span 1, which is the top left of the screen, all the way on the left side, it's too shallow for barges. So that's why we have the underslung platform proposed there. In the top middle of the screen is span 3. This is a very short span. And we need to use an underslung platform here because a barge just cannot physically fit within that area. And then in the lower right-hand corner of the figure, we're going to be using underslung platform beneath span 7 and a part of span 6 because it's too shallow. And then the third type is the high rail vehicle. So that's what's shown in the lower right-hand corner as well in blue. So we'll be using all 3 types depending on the span and location. For the flexi float barging, we've been coordinating this closely with Connecticut DOT and Connecticut Deep. The use of the Housatonic boat launch is prohibited on this project. This will remain open and operable at all times to the public. The contractor is not permitted to use this for construction activities. So the contractor will need to acquire waterfront access elsewhere. For staging and laydown areas, there's a few different options. For work occurring on tracks 2 and 4, which is on the southernmost bridge, there's an area beneath I-95 on the Milford side. It's a big kind of dirt gravel lot. That will be used. And then it may also be used for work on tracks 3 and 1. If additional staging areas are needed, the contractor must acquire those areas for staging and laydown areas. So there are some navigational impacts as there will be barges within the river. I mentioned there are 2 barges anticipated at any given time. One would be a work barge that would be about 30 feet by 60 feet, and one would be a material barge about 30 by 45 feet. Again, 2 barges at a time. They will progress span by span. The use of the Housatonic boat launch is prohibited, so that cannot be used. Span 4 of this bridge is a movable, it's a rolling bascule bridge that opens like that. And so the opening schedule for this bridge will not be impacted. There will be barge in half of the channel at any given time. It needs to be at least 50% open at all times, so you can still use this navigational channel even during construction. There are 32 setups total within the project limits, 9 of which are in the main channel. The barges will be lit. There will also be construction markers and buoys. And I should mention, as we're doing the work, the barges are going to remain in place, anchored in place, even during non-working hours. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Ryan Apanovich, who's our environmental lead, to talk through some of the sensitive areas on this project.
Thanks, Andre. So as Greg and Andre mentioned, the project spans a tidally influenced navigable waterway, the Housatonic River. There are vegetated tidal wetlands on both banks of the river. And in addition, to the south of the Devon Bridge, there are mitigation sites that were put in place and created as compensation for impacts that occurred on a previous Connecticut Department of Transportation project for the Moses Wheeler Bridge. Shown in these pictures on the southwest side of the river are some of the areas that are indicative of the banks of the river. There are mud flats and sparse tidal vegetation between the Moses Wheeler Bridge and the Devon Bridge. Shown in these pictures, on the easterly side of the river, southeast of the bridge, you can see some of the mitigation areas that were created. In the photo on the left, you can see a mud flat, and on the photo on the right, you can see some sparse vegetation that's just starting to grow from the beginning stages of the mitigation sites that were constructed. These photos are further south of the bridge, south of the Moses Wheeler Bridge, and the photo on the left shows the boat launch, which, as Andre stated, will not be used or impacted as part of this project. It will remain open and accessible to the public during all phases of the work. To the right on this photo is just a picture of what the natural tidal wetlands look in the area. So one of the main goals of the project, or secondary goals of the project, excuse me, was to avoid impacting locations like this. So in order to do that, as Andre explained earlier, there was a significant effort put into engineering specific access methods for the construction. These methods were meant to expedite the design schedule and minimize the amount of impacts, therefore creating a simplified permit process. The permits that have been obtained by the department to perform this work are a certificate of permission from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, a flood management general certification. They will be obtaining authorization from the U.S. Coast Guard through a construction letter, and then the contractor will also be required to submit a barge notification form detailing their work in the water. There was also a coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers Section 408 Division. This coordination was a result of barge work within the Federal Navigation Project, the federally maintained navigation channel, and the coordination has been completed with some stipulations that will be put into the construction contract. In addition, there were consultations performed with outside resource agencies such as NOAA National Marine Fisheries for Section 7 Endangered Species Act consultations. This was as a result of sturgeon that are present in the waterway and the critical habitat for the Atlantic sturgeon. Coordination was also done with CT Deep Fisheries, CT Deep Natural Diversity Database, the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office to obtain clearances regarding Section 106 coordination. and ongoing coordination with CT Deeps Boating Division, which will result in a markers permit, which will include signage on the bridge to make waterway users aware of the activities that are occurring. In addition, the project has been funded through a grant with the Federal Railroad Administration and therefore requires environmental clearance through the National Environmental Policy Act, and the department will be obtaining a categorical exclusion for this work, which will also cover the requirements under Connecticut's Environmental Policy Act. I will now turn the presentation back over to Andre.
All right, thanks, Ron. So I mentioned earlier, there are two different bridges side by side. Each bridge carries two tracks. So the bridge on the left, you see that is the northernmost structure that carries tracks 3 and 1, and the bridge on the right is the southernmost, carrying tracks 2 and 4. So just the nature of the work, while you're doing a repair to, let's say, the southernmost structure, which carries tracks 2 and 4, when you're doing work to that bridge, you need to take tracks 2 and 4 out of service at the bridge, and vice versa. When you're doing work on the northern bridge, you need to take tracks 3 and 1 out of service. So what does that mean? Next slide, please. So this is what we call a track chart. And here on this slide, we're focusing on tracks 2 and 4. So when work is occurring on the southern bridge, which carries tracks 2 and 4, the area that you see with red will be out of service. I should mention that the bridge here is in the blue rectangle. So the way the railroad is configured, when you're working on tracks 2 and 4, there are what's called crossovers at either end of the bridge that allow the trains to move from track 4 to track 2 to track 1 to track 3. So when you're working on tracks 2 and 4, you have those crossovers. So there's only this small portion of track that is actually out of service. So there's really very minimal impacts that we'll see here. Next slide. A greater challenge is when we're working on the northern bridge, which carries tracks 3 and 1, and for two reasons. One, you don't have the luxury of those crossovers immediately west and east of the bridge. And second, you have the Waterbury branch line, which is accessed through track 3. So when we're working on that northern bridge and tracks 3 and 1 are out of service, the outage area is much longer, as you see here in red. Stratford Station will still be accessible via temporary bridge plating, but the Waterbury branch line will not be accessible. So we'll need to either use busing or a temporary platform station to make sure users along the Waterbury branch line still have access to their everyday needs. So we've also been working very closely with adjacent projects. I'll speak on one now, and then I'll turn it back over to Greg Funk to speak on another project. Here we'll talk about Time 1. So this is the Track Improvement Mobility Enhancement 1 project. And this is relevant because it butts up directly to the west of the bridge. So in the top right corner of the screen, you see the Housatonic River and you see the Devon Bridge. The Time 1 project limits start right at East Main Street in Stratford, and then they continue 3 miles to the west into Bridgeport. That project is split into 3 different construction phases, and the first construction phase is slated to start this coming spring. And so that project will be in construction at the same time this Devon interim repairs project will be in construction. So we are closely coordinating the outages because both projects require track outages. We need to make sure that the track outages are not conflicting with each other, and we're doing that right now and working towards that.
All right, thanks, Andre. Another project that is adjacent to the project that we're presenting tonight is the Waterbury Line Station Improvement Project. So this adjacent station improvement project will include their own outages on the Waterbury Line anticipated in 2026. So as Andre just mentioned, the interim repair project has optimized outages with the Time 1 project. The design team for all the projects are currently working to identify if outage schedules can be streamlined between all 3 projects. The current cost estimating is ongoing. We are anticipating between 80 million and 110 million. At this time, the project has a federal grant and is being undertaken with 80% federal funds, 15% state funds, and a 5% Amtrak contribution. We have a construction start date of October 2025, and our duration is anticipated as 2 years. Pass this back over to Aaron for the question and answer session.
And just to remind folks, we're live tonight with the Zoom Q&A, where you could post questions in the chat. But you could also reach us through that DOT project 301-557@ct.gov email for questions. We're checking that. We're checking the voicemails on phone number 860-594-2020. And then if you have additional, looking for additional information, you could go to the website, that was posted to the chat or is on the screen there. And just a reminder for folks that the comment period is open through January 23rd, 2020. I don't see any questions yet, so we'll just wait a moment or two for folks to come on. And just a reminder, all these options are available in the chat if you want to go there to click a link or send an email. All right, we have a first question. And Greg, this is going to be for you. Why are we doing this project, and why can't you just replace the bridge now?
So the interim repair project involves targeted repairs to keep the structure in service until the new structure can take over the rail service. So the replacement project's not part of this presentation, but we need the existing structure to remain serviceable until the anticipated construction start in the early 2030s.
Good. And we have another question that came in. What happens if the river floods during construction? And Ryan, that's going to go to you.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. As part of the project permits, the contractor will be required to either remove or secure barges prior to a significant storm event. The contractor will also be required to secure any materials on land and move them out of any flood-prone areas. Part of the contract will require submission of this flood contingency plan upon award.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, and we got another question that came in. And Andre, this is going to be for you. How would this project impact Ashcroft Inc. Directly next to the bridge on the Stratford side?
Yeah, thank you. I do not anticipate this project really impacting this property at all. We are aware of this property, but just the nature of the work here, we're not building any access roads. The barges will be launched elsewhere. The high rail equipment will be accessed off the project site, either Longbrook Avenue or Naugatuck Ave, in the underslung platform. And then all the work is contained to the superstructure of the bridge. So I don't anticipate any impacts to the Ashcroft property.
Thanks, Andre. And just a reminder to folks, the 3 ways you could contact us tonight are by leaving an email at that email address, leaving a voice message on the phone, or through the Zoom Q&A chat. All right. See another question coming in. Right. So the question is, and Ryan, I think this will be for you. Will construction affect recreational boating or industry that uses the navigational channel?
We don't anticipate any impacts to recreational boating or navigation through this project. Some of the extensive coordination that has to occur as part of both the NEPA process and the permitting process is to ensure that waterway users are not restricted during this project. So as Andre mentioned during the presentation, there will be barge setups in the navigation channel, but one of the requirements of this project is to make sure that at least 50% of that channel is open for navigation at all time. There will be lighting, markers, and buoys and informational signs around the area to inform boaters where and when work will occur. And there will also be coordination with CT Deep to make sure that they provide notice as appropriate to waterway users. In addition, I want to make note that the opening of the span, as we made note of earlier, will also not be affected by any of the elements of this project.
Thank you, Ryan, very much for that answer. And just a reminder, it's easier for us to use the Zoom Q&A chat to reply to questions. And it's under there's a Q&A option on the settings. We got a few more questions. Ryan, I think I have one for you here, and then I'm going to zoom through some of these. Ryan, there's a question about are these indigenous people areas, and what are the sturgeon related work restrictions?
Sorry, Aaron, just getting off mute. The work restrictions for the project and part of the cultural resource section 106 coordination that's occurring under NEPA hasn't indicated there are any concerns related to the type of work that will be performed on the project. One of the restrictions on the staging and access is that no significant ground disturbing activities or any modifications to the existing environment occurs. And then with regard to the sturgeon related work restrictions, I actually think Genevieve may have additional information specific to the permits and what was approved, but we do have permits with time of year restrictions that Genevieve can explain a little bit more.
Thank you, Ryan. For fisheries restrictions, we have a restriction between March 1st and June 30th for artificial lighting directed onto the water surface, as well as loud construction activities. This is to protect diadromous fish migration. And for the sturgeon, we've done an in-depth consultation with NOAA Marine Fisheries to come to the conclusion that the project may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect the sturgeon species in the Housatonic River.
Thank you, Ryan and Genevieve. There's a follow-up question for one or both of you. I'll put it to you, Ryan, first. That's of a similar nature. Will construction affect fishing or wildlife?
Sure. I think the answer is very similar to what I said and what Genevieve said. We have done consultations with all of the relevant resource agencies, the NOAA National Marine Fisheries, as we mentioned, for Section 7 resources, fisheries resources, National Diversity Database covers the wildlife, Connecticut State wildlife listed species. And we've also met with CT Deep Fisheries, and all have agreed that the specific elements of this project do not anticipate any impacts to the species that would cause any meaningful disruption.
Ryan. Just to remind folks, our email address, dotproject301-557@ct.gov, and our phone number 860-594-2020. We got a few more questions in, and this one will go to Greg. Is this project under a PLA?
Thanks, Aaron. So the department does have a process to screen for PLAs. I don't anticipate that this project will happen.
Thank you. And Dave, this next question will be for you. And we got it from the Zoom Q&A chat. The access that the contractor needs to launch the barges, where are possible locations that they will need to acquire? And is it just to launch at the beginning of the project, or is it ongoing? Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I can answer that one. So there's several waterfront access locations, mostly south of the existing bridge. They're all private marinas. There'll be no use of the Housatonic State Boat launch, which we mentioned. It is the contractor's responsibility to secure that area through negotiations with that private landowner. And the second piece of that was launch or ongoing. So the way we sort of have our construction sequencing laid out, it is that area will be secured. The barges come in via truck in pieces. They're modular units. They're rigged and placed in the water, and they're joined up in the water, and then they're transported to the project location and spudded into place with equipment on it. So I think the easy answer to that question is it's really just for mob and demob of the barges. It's not going to be constant traffic going in and out of that location.
Thank you, Dave. And just to remind folks on the line, or if you watch this, after this meeting when it's posted on YouTube, the comment period is open through January 23rd, 2025. All right, we just got another question. Read this real quick. Greg, this might be for you or for, oh, you know what, Greg, there's a question on the Zoom chat. What is a PLA?
Oops, sorry, I come off mute here. So PLA, it's a project labor agreement, and it's essentially a collective bargaining agreement, I believe, with labor and unions.
Thank you. All right, we have another question. I believe this is going to Andre, and maybe with Ryan's help. Will work be happening overnight, and what are the expectations for noise levels of this work? Can the timeline of the track impact for 1/3 be explained a bit more? If there was a spill or of either equipment or chemicals, how will residents in the area be notified?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there's a kind of a few questions here, so we'll try to break it up piece by piece. The first part was, will work be happening overnight, and what are the expectations for noise levels? Right now, we're anticipating work Monday through Friday daytime hours. That may change. We're still working with Metro North to see what their allowable windows are. But I should mention the second part of that question is the noise level. So per contract, we're required to stay at or below the 90 decibel limit, which is equivalent to like a hair dryer or a power tool. So there will be inspectors on site that are monitoring the noise levels and making sure they don't go above 90 decibels. The second part of the question was to explain the timeline of the track impact for tracks 3 and 1 a bit more. So apologies if this was not clear originally, but so there'll be long-term track outages when you're working on the Southern Bridge. Tracks 2 and 4 will be out of service long-term. And when you're working on the North Bridge, tracks 3 and 1 will be out of service long-term. This will be a continuous outage. We're still determining the total length of that outage, but it's going to be longer term, so that's why we need to use the busing or the temporary transfer station. We're still evaluating those options. The last part of that question, I'll let Ryan answer that about if there's a spill or chemicals.
Thanks, Andre. The contractor will be required to have a spill containment plan in place, and we'll have to have appropriate materials on site to contain any minor releases. In addition, there's requirements that within the contract that the contractor would notify CT Deep spill unit, and any information and any significant spills or environmental impacts that come of that would be communicated through coordination with CT Deep and CT DOT to make sure that anyone that might be affected in the area was made aware.
Andre and Ryan. I'm not seeing any more questions come through, but we'll hang on a moment just to see if any more come online. We appreciate everyone's questions tonight. We're checking to see if there's any other email questions, and we don't see any. Just a reminder for folks that the comment period for this project is open through January 23rd, 2025. Comments can be sent in by that email address, dotproject301-557@ct.gov, or left by voicemail 860-594-2020. All right. We appreciate everyone's time tonight, and we're going to, I'll just a reminder, if you do leave a voicemail, reference project 301-557, please. Thank you very much for everyone's time. Have a wonderful evening, and good night.